Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, Naran. That was Nick. That was good. Okay. So, in general, I tend to be a bit of a contrarian, which means I like to take unpopular viewpoints. I like to root for the underdog. I don't like to see people somebody getting over on somebody else. I like to stand in harm's way. I like to look after the underdogs. I like to take care of people and help people. But I also tend to be a bit edgy, and I tend to defend unpopular positions. I think usually because, in general, people tend to be quite stupid. And so what is popular opinion is usually extremely shallow. And so one of the repercussions of being a deep thinker is that you're generally at odds with most people because, like I said, most people are shallow. And if you're not, then you're automatically at odds. And there's a little demonstration of me being edgy right there. In case you didn't know what I was talking about and kind of what that looks like, there's an example of it. You guys sharp enough to follow that one, or did that? Okay, all right. So, I have some thoughts today. I think that, I'll start out by saying this. The world is becoming a better place. Noam Chomsky, you guys know who he is? Raise your hand if you know who Noam Chomsky is. Okay. Noam Chomsky is a super smart professor of linguistics who had some real groundbreaking theories, and really how you feel about Noam Chomsky determines what side of linguistics you're on. But he also is a really powerful intellectual voice for the liberal movement. He's not like liberal light. He's liberal heavy. He's super smart. And he's now in his 80s. He's extremely up to date on current affairs. He's extremely well read. And he, generally speaking, has very unpopular but really powerful positions on stuff. Imagine if Bernie Sanders was super smart, like way smarter than he is, and was a college professor, extremely well read. That's Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky made the point, he goes, people are crying about how terrible the world is. He goes, they're just not old enough to know. You're just not old enough to know what the world was like. And he gave an example. He said, when I was growing up in the 50s, if you were on your front porch beating your wife and someone called the police would come and they would say, "Hey buddy, take it inside." Do you guys follow that? "Hey buddy, take it inside." Nowadays, I don't know if you guys are familiar with domestic violence laws. I am. I'm a priest, and so I counsel a congregation, and I've had to deal with domestic violence issues in our congregation. The rule in California is if the police get called out on a domestic violence call, guess what happens? What happens, Mr. Cop? Yeah, somebody has to go with them. There's no, they go home. They find out who the primary aggressor is, and they make an arrest. A lot of times what happens, do you know what percentage of domestic violence victims are men? You might lie because you want to sound cool, like you want to sound woke, but none of you know. And none of you are even close. Unless you've studied it. 43% of domestic violence victims are men. Almost half. Less than 1% of domestic violence shelters in the U.S. service men. Let me just explain to you what that means. That means that there are 2,000 domestic violence shelters in the U.S. and 20 of them help men. Anyway, domestic violence laws now, and a lot of times what happens is I think it's like 80% of the time, the guys go in for domestic violence calls. You know why? Because the police come out, the woman's smacking around her guy. The police come out and say, we're going to take this woman to jail. And the guy says, no, don't take my wife to jail. And they go, well, somebody's got to go to jail. And so the guy takes the hit half the time. Do you follow that? Heavy, huh? Anyway, Noam Chomsky made the point that when he was growing up in the 50s, if somebody was beating their woman on the front porch, the cops would say, take it inside. That's insane. You guys know who Jeffrey Dahmer is? Would you see like a documentary on him or something like that? Jeffrey Dahmer was a murderer, a serial killer who cannibalized his victims. He ate human flesh. I think it was in Milwaukee. This was in the 80s. Really heavy. I think he would also sodomize them and then kill them and then eat them. It was like a really twisted fellow. One of his victims escaped. Went out like naked. Young black kid ran out naked. The cops saw a naked black kid in Milwaukee running through the streets. Totally drugged out of his mind because he would drug his victims. And they gave him back to Dahmer, who said, no, we're gay lovers and we had a lover's spat and I should take him home. How heavy is that? Crazy, right? If you think domestic violence wasn't totally acceptable in our culture, do you know what Popeye used to do all the time to olive oil? By the way, olive oil, right? It's a low-class Italian immigrant woman. It was a full racist critique of Italian immigrants who were coming into the U.S. in the 20s and 30s with the stereotypes, Brutus and olive oil. You guys know Popeye, the cartoon? What would Popeye regularly do to olive oil? Huh? He'd punch her in the face. Do you know what the first sitcom in television is? The first situational comedy? The Honeymooners. Now, in the Honeymooners, they had a line that they would do every single episode. It was like the fun, like the line where everybody would laugh in the studio audience. It was like every episode had this one line. You know what the line was? To the moon. What was her name? Alice. To the moon, Alice. He would show his wife his fist, and he would say, to the moon, Alice. And everybody would laugh. Jackie Gleason. He was like a big bear of a man. He was like 230, 240 pounds. He was married to this little thing, this little waif of a girl. Hey, what's the deal, man? All you guys have to use the bathroom simultaneously? Oh, take him out. That's fine. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's all good. To the moon, Alice. He would show his fist and say, to the moon. You think about what the value of a culture is if that's considered to be funny and suitable for primetime television. Think about the value of a culture that thinks that smacking olive oil was appropriate for Popeye in a cartoon. So what Noam Chomsky was describing was very much the status quo in the 50s and 60s. Nowadays, if there's a domestic violence call, the cops come out and they take someone to jail. The world's become a better place. A much better place. Much better place. Now, I watched a YouTube video recently. They had hidden cameras, and they had a guy yelling at and beginning to push his girlfriend or wife. You don't know. They're on the street, they're having an argument, and he starts getting really aggressive with her. Never actually got to push her. Just started getting really aggressive and sticking his finger in her face and yelling at her. And you know what happened? So they're on the streets of New York City or Chicago. It's a downtown situation. There's some dude talking to his wife. They're yelling at each other. And he starts really getting aggressive with her. You know what happened? What happened?
Everybody starts going against the guy.
People freak out. Dudes on the street are running across the street, screaming at the guy. Cars are stopping. Guys are jumping out of their cars. Everybody is ready to beat the crap out of the guy. And then I thought you saw, oh, it's a camera, social experiment. Social experiment. They flipped it. They had a woman. And she started chastising her guy. And she started, nobody jumped in. So she started shoving him and kicking at him and pushed him and really like assaulting him. And you know what people did? Open up for them. No, we'll open up for you. And you know what? Why is that door locked? Huh?
We aren't officially open. So
That's ridiculous. There's a bunch of people in here. Why would you do that? Doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. We may not be officially open, but you've got a bunch of people in here. People were laughing, pointing at the guy, mocking him, having a gay old time, laughing, yucking it up. You guys know the phrase gay old time? Do you know what that means? You know what that means? You know what that means? Having a gay old time? You know what that means? How about you? In the back with the stash? You know what that means? What does it mean? That's right. Gay means happy. It's gay. Nobody uses the term gay to mean happy anymore. Maybe I came in on the tail end of when it was appropriate usage. I remember the phrase from when I was a kid. Maybe I read it in books or something like that. But everybody was having a gay old time, laughing, mocking the person, pointing fingers at them, while the girl was just savagely assaulting her boyfriend in public. What's up with that? Hey man, good to see you. So Noam Chomsky made the point that the world has become a much better place. A lot of time activists are too young to know that, so they just like, the world's so terrible. But they don't know what it used to be like, and they don't see the trajectory we're on. You follow? Like 150 years ago, we thought it was okay to own people. Wrap your head around that one. 100 years ago, half our population wasn't able to take part in the democratic process. You know what I mean when I say that? 100 years ago, women weren't allowed to vote. That's half the population of our country. Weren't allowed to vote. 50 years ago, people were still getting lynched. 40 years ago, there was no such thing as sexual harassment. If you squeezed, your secretary's butt in the workplace, that was just the program. That's just what it meant to work as a secretary. You follow? 50 years ago, being gay was illegal. That was 1970. 70? Right? Are you sure? You don't know, right? Learn your culture, dude. It's 70 or 71. You follow? Things have gotten better. I mean, nowadays, if you're vegan, despite the memes about how vegans are just these just ridiculous fanatics, which they find the one percenters. Do you guys know that term, one percenter? What's that mean?
The top class.
No, you know what the term refers to historically? There was a massive motorcycle gang riot in the 40s, and the police had to be called out. It was a really, really big deal with outlaw motorcycle gangs. And somebody responded back and said, these people represent 1% of the motorcycle community. And so then all the outlaw motorcycle gangs got patches that said 1%, and they started wearing them, letting you know they were that 1% criminal element of the motorcycle gangs. It became a badge of honor. So, this obviously there's a bunch of sheeple and poorly informed people just going along with the trends. But nowadays, if you're an astute vegan and you tell somebody you're vegan, they're like, oh yeah, I'm trying to stop eating meat too. Yeah, I don't feel good about it either. I'm just eating fish now. I haven't eaten red meat in 5 years. I'm practically speaking vegan for all intents and purposes. I got lots of friends who are vegan. It's like you're black. I got a lot of vegan friends. People want to make sure that they're cool with you. That wasn't when I became vegan in 1988. It wasn't like that. I got harassed. The world's changed. Across the board, it's become a better place. It's become a lot better place. Noam Chomsky was making this point to a bunch of college kids. I think it was at UC Berkeley. Just as someone who was involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s, he was talking to people nowadays who are oh, it's just so bad, it's getting so much worse. He's like, you guys have no idea the trajectory we're on. Things are getting better and better as time goes on. All the work that's been put in has made a change. You guys shouldn't be depressed. You should be more hopeful than ever that things are going to get better. That was the point he was trying to make to these young 20-something-year-olds he was talking to. Billie Eilish is an unapologetic vegan. Atulia worked on a set of James Cameron's movies where everyone's vegan. She was a cook. Everybody has to eat vegan on a set. It's like, it's so far out. I mean, even going into a grocery store these days, which I rarely do, but like going into a grocery store for me is almost like a magical experience. You know, I was never around when I was smoking pot, which was in the 80s. I haven't smoked pot since 1989. But when I was smoking pot, there was no such thing as a dispensary. So like the idea of a dispensary now is like, it's like I was watching a comedian, and he was saying that, you know, what would he tell himself as a child if he was to go back in time? And he would say, you would have this device with you, like a phone, right? And all the pornography in the world is like in your pocket. That's what you want to tell to his teenage self if he was to go back in time. I don't watch pornography either. I haven't smoked pot since 1989. I haven't watched pornography since 1989. So it's like, you know, this is all sort of like, but that idea, like, it's all in your pocket. You follow? You know? So the idea of a dispensary to me is like, I've never been to a dispensary, but it's like kind of mind-boggling to me. Like, oh my God, they have hundreds of kinds of marijuana and they're all just available and you can just go in there legally. It's like on a corner. You can just go in there. Like, it's just like, you know, that emoji of like your brain exploding? You follow? Because I was into the ganja culture for a minute when I was a kid. And so the idea that that's the case is like kind of mind-blowing to me. Does that make sense? I have the same experience when I go into a grocery store. The amount of vegan products which are available in your average Ralph's or Vons blows my mind. They have better groceries than were available at health food stores. Health food stores don't even exist anymore. There was no Whole Foods or Wild Oats or Mother's Market when I grew up. There was no health food supermarket. It did not exist. It was a little corner drugstore, like tiny little thing. And it was health food. Do you follow? And they didn't have much. I mean, there was a place called Pier 1. Is that what it's called? On Abbott Kinney? No, Pier 1 is that store. Air 1. Thank you. Air 1. There was Air 1, thank you. And there was Miss Gooch's. There was a few places like this that were approaching. They weren't really a supermarket, but they were like maybe half the size of your average Whole Foods, or a third of the size of your average Whole Foods. But they were like, you didn't have stuff like that. Now you go to a Ralph's and you like have epic organic produce and vegan options. It's unbelievable. You go to a regular restaurant. I don't go to restaurants, but sometimes I look at menus of restaurants because I haven't eaten at a restaurant 30 years. Haven't eaten at a restaurant. But I own a restaurant, so I got to check menus. I'm just blown away by the options at restaurants, like McDonald's, Taco Bell. Everybody's either gone the Beyond route or the Impossible route. Everybody's got either the Beyond Burger or the Impossible Burger. I can't even cope. It's like ridiculous. I mean, I would never. Did you say Haribo? just see how much the world's changed. The world's become a better place. It's like amazing. I'm, by the way, not like supportive of ganja the way I am of health food, just FYI. However, I do think if alcohol and cigarettes are legal, ganja is way less of a problem. So I'm glad that they haven't gotten rid of those things. And anyway, prohibition is just doesn't work at all, in my opinion. That's a whole other thing. We've already done that experiment. It doesn't work. Anyway, so yeah, the world is just so different, and it's getting better all the time. It's getting better all the time. I think we need to be a little surgical, though, in terms of like, you know, the ships we jump on. It used to be, although the world's becoming a better place, it used to be that your integrity mattered more to you than anything else. The world used to kind of be like this, that your integrity mattered more than anything else. Guys were killing themselves in the 40s because they tried to enlist in the military to go fight in World War II, but they were flat-footed or they had bad eyesight. They couldn't make it. They didn't make the cut. And they were killing themselves in small towns all over America because they couldn't deal with not being able to fight for their country. Nathan Hale. You guys know who Nathan Hale is? He's an American Revolutionary War hero. He was hanged to death by the British as a spy at the tender age of 21. And he's super famous for saying, "My only regret is I can't give many lives for the great cause that I'm engaged in. I'm so satisfied with the great cause in which I'm engaged that my only regret is I can't offer many lives to its service." Was his exact words. People used to be like that. People are still like that, but they're getting to be in shorter supply. People made promises, and they kept them. Divorce rates used to be much lower because people would make a promise to get married, and they just have to figure it out. They gave their word. Why take a lifetime vow if you can bail on it? You could say, well, you should be able to leave a bad marriage. Well, then why take a lifelong vow? You don't say, I'm going to take a lifelong vow to be married to you unless I change my mind. And then it's not really a vow. It's just you're saying, let's do this for a while. You follow? Now you could say we shouldn't have lifetime vows. No problem. Then that's your ethical stance. But if you take a lifetime vow, by the very act of taking a lifetime vow, what do you demonstrate? That you believe in them. You follow? By the very act of taking a lifetime vow, you demonstrate elegantly that you believe in lifetime vows. Why take one if you're going to break it? But we're so casual nowadays. It's like, oh, that was my starter marriage. I had a quarter-life crisis. That was my starter marriage. Quarter-life crisis, that's a new one. Starter marriage, that's a new one. I remember when these terms became neologisms. They came into vogue and people started using them. virtue signaling, starter marriage, quarter-life crisis, cancel culture. I was around when all these terms came into vogue, when they came into existence. You guys were too. So although the world has changed and become a much better place, there's also been some other shifts which have happened. And that we've moved from a virtue-based culture where people were considered to be successful in life if they had integrity and honor, if they kept their word, if they lived according to their values, if they did the right thing even when nobody was looking. We've shifted from that to a culture where we value people who have lots of things. It's not who you are, it's what you have. And then we shift it again. Then we shift it again. And it's not even what you have, it's how you appear. We become a culture where we value appearances. Like the Kardashians now are sort of like the standard American family, like the model. It's like not the Brady Bunch anymore, it's the Kardashians. And the Kim K and Kanye, their Kimye are just, it's terrible, right? She's trying to have him committed. He went super Christian, he got radicalized. Now he only does gospel, and he's super upset at his wife. He's afraid she's poisoned the kids. He went off his rocker. You follow? But obviously things were awful before everybody in the world became aware of it. But they were like the it couple. Till 5 minutes ago. You know? We move from who you are to what you have to how you appear. People want to appear that they're happy. They want to appear that they're living their best life. I was looking at friends of mine Instagram. She went on a diet. She said, I'm posting a full frontal, which full frontal actually means full frontal nudity, like the full Monty or something like that. But anyway, she said full frontal. I don't think she knew what the term meant, but she essentially meant she was showing her stomach. But she was actually turned to the side at least a 45 to 60 degree angle. You follow? It's almost impossible to just get a full direct image of somebody anymore. Every shot is taken from a side. Have you guys noticed this? I mean, of course you have. This is how you all take photos. But every photo is taken to the side, showing your side, holding the camera up so it's looking down on you. You know what I mean? And most of the time when people are taking photos, they're so heavily filtered, it's almost like you're looking like an Andy Warhol painting. You know? It's almost cartoonesque. Everything's so smoothed out. Then sometimes people, just to combat this, it's like, oh, I'm going to show you my cellulite and this and that. But they always manage to like look epic. Like they definitely went and got a tan. They're still shooting it from the like right angle. You know what I mean? Nobody's like, there's that one lady, Celeste Barber. You guys know who she is? Is that her name, Celeste Barber? Celeste Barber has tens of millions of followers on Instagram. And she'll show a picture of like a model, like some model doing some like a bizarre thing, like some acrobatic thing, like on one foot, like holding a globe up in the air, like just like ridiculous. And then she'll do herself doing the same thing. And so she's kind of like a little overweight, and like she'll be holding something up, she'll like fall, and like it'll be like a parody of the standards of beauty. You guys never seen this? Oh, she's epic. She's hilarious. You want to see what people actually look like? Go peep Celeste Barber. Yeah, we moved from a culture of like what you are to a culture of what you have. That's kind of the Industrial Revolution made that happen. It has been happening for a while. And then to a culture of how you appear. Everybody's putting on a show. That's a way in which things aren't getting better. That's a way in which we have something to learn from the past. Things are getting a lot better in a lot of ways in the world. That's the way in which things aren't getting better. Here's another one. There's this whole like pseudo woke thing going on, where you find a cause celeb and then you show how woke you are by getting super critical of everybody who isn't up to the date on exactly how you're supposed to behave on social media. Let me be a little more elaborate in my explanation. I think I'm only like speaking to people who already understand what I'm saying. There's a phenomenon nowadays, it's become especially popular in the aftermath of George Floyd and the popularization of the BLM movement. Where if you don't behave properly online, Lady Gaga, like she was just like, here, she just gave her account over to some other people and said, here, take my account over for a couple months. That way she's not responsible for what's posted, and whoever she empowered to do it, whatever people of color she empowered to take care of her account, then it's like they're using her platform, and so she can't be criticized. She's just like, I'm out, you know? There's a phenomenon now where if you don't post exactly the right thing in exactly the right way, then usually like a bunch of like aggro Karen type white women will get really critical of you really fast for not dotting your I's and crossing your T's sufficiently. And it's like, it's savage. And as quick as you came into prominence with your pseudo-deep shallowness, just as quickly you get canceled. And people are taking you down. And they're building you up and taking you down. It's like a TikTok world. Everything like comes into being real fast and it's like gone in an instant, you know? It's a Snapchat world. like here today, gone tomorrow. You get your instant fame, you get your instant infamy, and you're like up and you're down. You follow? And if you don't have like the right opinion, like exactly the right opinion, can't speak the language in exactly the way you're supposed to, then you get savagely attacked. Then you have your armor, I've been taking this time to reflect on myself and learn and grow, and there's like a whole I'm out kind of way you do the I'm out thing. It's the way you bow out. You almost wear that like armor. So I'm going to hit you with some unpopular opinions right now that were definitely warrant me getting canceled, at least in the eyes of some people. Police killing unarmed black people is not a major problem in our country. It's not the big problem in our country. Uncontrolled cops killing black people. Unarmed black people. It's not what's going on. It's not the problem. Is wanton police violence towards people of color the big problem that's facing our country, Howard? Is wanton police violence against unarmed black men the problem that's facing our culture, Howard? How sure are you of that?
I'm very sure.
He's the darkest guy in the room. He's darker than you, Chief. Sorry. You're looking at yourself, that's tone deaf. Even you looking at yourself is tone deaf. Huh? It's not funny. Howard's a cop. Ex-cop. You shoot somebody in Los Angeles, they separate all the officers involved, they bring people in, they bring helicopters in, they photograph the entire scene, internal investigations automatically does a full treatment. They take it to the DA just in case they want to press charges. They interrogate everybody, everybody's put on leave. How heavy is LA's response to like an officer-involved shooting?
It's extreme. Even the DA has a separate shoot team that will come down, separate from the internal affairs of the police department.
The DA itself has another double internal affairs that comes down to their own like non-police force investigation every single time, right? Yeah. You know how many unarmed black people got shot last year by cops? Oh, I'm sorry, killed by cops? You know how many unarmed black people got killed by cops last year? Anybody know? 9. 9. Five of those were committing crimes. They just weren't armed. Eight children die of starvation every minute. 8 children die of starvation every minute. Children. 30 people die of starvation every minute. 8 of them were children. Every minute. It's weird. We see an injustice somewhere. We become hyper-focused on that as if it's the most important thing in the world, while we're still callous towards unbelievable suffering that's going on all over the world and has been. But we feel good about it because we got freaked out about something. You know how many black people are murdered by black people every year? $8,000. You follow? A bad weekend in Chicago doubles, quadruples what the police force does in an entire year. We should be up in arms about that. Don't get me wrong, those animals that murdered George Floyd should go to jail for life. It was murder. But this myth that the police are killing black people all over this country, unarmed, innocent black people, it's just that. It's a myth. Criminal violence. And the solutions are way more complicated than defunding the police force. Although it's not a bad idea. I'd rather have my police force doing policing. Also, outlawing chokeholds. Dumbest thing I've heard in a long time, too. Chokeholds are fantastic. They enable a smaller person. It's the most vulnerable part of your body. I want my police using potentially non-violent, non-lethal means of controlling others. By the time they deploy a gun, they only got one option, to pull the trigger. Well, sometimes chokeholds kill people. Yeah, guns always kill people. So you're way better off using the chokehold because maybe you won't kill him than a gun where you're definitely going to kill the guy. We need bigger, stronger, more roided out cops, more well-trained in hand-to-hand combat. We need our police officers to be violent, but like non-lethal violence. And then they need to stop playing social worker. They need to stop playing counselor. They need to stop playing mental health specialist. We need to be able to deploy other resources for that. We defund the police for that and let the police just do the policing. What do we need to deal with? We need to deal with the fact that black people are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than white people. 16 times more likely to live under the poverty level. We need to deal with those problems. Those are much bigger problems with thousands of times worse repercussions on the black community in America every year than police violence against unarmed people. Yay or nay? Along with us becoming a culture that looks at appearances instead of virtue, instead of like what you actually stand for, we've also taken that same shallowness in the way we pick our causes. Did you follow that? We shallowly get up in arms about a cause, and we come up with like shallow ideas about how we're going to solve problems, and we feel satisfied that we've done like a little something, instead of taking the trouble to really inform ourselves about the situation and figure out how we can surgically become part of the solution. Did you guys follow that? 62% of black people live below the poverty level in this country. 4% of white people live below the poverty level. That's a problem. Black people with a similar level of education are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than white people with a similar level of education. I see it. That's a serious problem. That's something which is affecting people. The world has become a much better place. We tolerate injustice much less than we used to. And that's a good thing. And we should keep that going. The world's also become a much more shallow place. You listen to civil rights leaders in the 60s, they knew their stuff. They knew their stuff. And it's so different now. There's a neologism called virtue signaling. It was originally used in religious discussions. It's about people who, instead of being good Jews or good Christians, they engage in ritual acts that are identified by their community as being representative of like what it means to be a good person. And they wave, that's called dharma dvaji in Sanskrit, flag bearers of dharma. You wave the flag of dharma, dharma dvaji. It's a criticism in ancient Sanskrit literature that you wave the flag of dharma. You're not actually dharmic, but you wave the flag of dharma. You externally appear to be righteous, religious. I think there's a modern phenomenon with that. Everybody's looking for how they're perceived rather than who they are. Everybody's looking to get some likes, some comments, a good engagement rate, to appear in the right way, to get validated. People used to do that like in a sexual relationship, and we get validated, like they get their codependent freak on, you know, in their familial life or in their friendly life or in their romantic life. Nowadays people do it like they have a relationship with social media. And it's almost like they're in a romantic affair with a computer. What to speak of internet pornography and how ridiculously pervasive that is and what negative effects that's having on people, men and women, the world over. What to speak of that? People are in an almost romantic relationship with their social media platforms in that they derive their sense of self-worth by their popularity. Instead of the depth of the content they produce, or the depth of the life they lead. How about that one? It's almost nowadays like if you didn't post it on social media, it didn't happen. The truth is, if you live a life of integrity, if integrity becomes your strength, your wealth, if your virtue becomes your priority, it doesn't matter what happens in the world. You'll sleep peacefully at night. It's the cure to shallowness. You have to spend your life focused on being a good person, on being a deep person, on being a thoughtful person, on being a kind person. If you do that, deep people will get the memo. Maybe you can talk about it, help some other people along. But your sense of self won't be up for grabs. You won't be like playing Russian roulette. What is it, 2 minutes? 5? You won't be playing Russian roulette with your self-worth. You won't be shooting craps with your self-worth. And you'll be able to focus on what is actually going to uplift the world instead of what appears to be popular. For 5 minutes. So, I had a verse I thought was pretty cool that I was thinking about. Oh, hey, we got a 5-star review at my restaurant. Look at that. I need those every day. It's not like rest on my laurels now. Yoga Yukta Vishuddhatma, one who's pure, one who's yoked to yoga. Vijitatma, one who's controlled himself. Jitendriya, one who's subdued his senses. This is for a man or a woman. One who's yoked to yoga, one who's a pure soul. Those who conquer themselves, those who've conquered their senses. Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma. That's a cool compound. One whose self-interest has become the self-interest of all. You follow? Somebody who cares about the world as if the world was themselves. One who's broadened their sense of self, that the fate of others is as their own fate. It's a Sanskrit equivalent of the categorical imperative, the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. The biblical imperative to love your neighbor as thyself. It's a cool Sanskrit version of that. Kurvanapi na lipyate. Even though that person acts in the world, they never become enmeshed. Lipyate means they never become smeared or dirtied or sullied or soiled. They're in this world, but they're not of it. Padmamiva, like a lotus. This is the voice of a culture of virtue. It's not about what you appear as. It's not about what you have. It's about who you are. You've restrained your passions so you're not addicted to them, so they don't own you. If you haven't restrained your passions, then you're just a glutton, just a victim of your senses. But it's not just getting rid of the negative, you've also got to do the positive. We have to value integrity. We have to value honor. We have to value depth. That's a piece of perennial philosophy that never goes out of style. And the world can become as shallow as it wants to be. It doesn't change the truth of this. You want to get involved in activism? Figure out what the problems actually are. You want to signal virtue? Best way to signal your virtue is just to simply be virtuous. That way, whenever anybody checks in on you, you know what I mean? Whenever that spy cam turns on, you're doing the right thing. You want to feel good? Be good. You want to get validation? Get your validation from having done the right thing. We done? 10 seconds. Thanks for listening, IGTV, TTYL.